Go Big Red Indeed, No Block, No Rock, Season 2, Episode 42, coming at you live from the Nebraska Brewing Company tap room in La Vista, Nebraska. We are 53 days out from kickoff in Ireland, and we wanted to bring a fairly noteworthy guest onto the NBNR podcast. We have with us Mitch Sherman, the sports writer for The Athletic who covers Nebraska sports. We want to thank you for coming on and dedicating some of your time tonight.
Yeah, glad to do it. Good to be here. I like your setup. This is nice.
Yeah.
Can see the how the beer is made in the background.
Yeah.
Sample a little bit of it. Have some pizza. Appreciate you guys having me. Sorry that it took like a month to make this happen, but it was the month of June. While it's not the heart of football season by any means, it was like, okay, we do this Monday nights. And I'm like, well, this Monday doesn't work. This Monday doesn't work. That Monday doesn't work. It seems like I'm way busier when I had that conversation than I actually am. Like the life of a sports writer in the summer is actually, it's okay. Sometimes people in my profession, act as if, we're just the most stressed, overworked, always on call, so much pressure in our jobs. And, a lot of times I find myself thinking about how, I just get to watch sports for my job. They pay me to go watch sports. And if there's not sports, then we just talk about sports. So really, it isn't that bad. Even in those weeks in the football season where I am busy and I have like 16-hour days, I'm still watching and talking and writing about sports. So it works.
Okay, I like that because one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, you've had experience working for Omaha World Herald and you did write for ESPN and now you're with The Athletic. Is there like a big difference between those? Like, do you have to meet a certain quota? Like, how is writing for The Athletic different from all those other companies that you've worked for?
Well, The Athletic is awesome. I'll give you the company pitch, but it's great. And it's a new company. But now we're an established company and I've been at The Athletic for a little over 3 years and we were purchased this last year, by the New York Times for like a lot of money. So it lended to our legitimacy as a company, and we're a separate newsroom. We're not the New York Times. They have their staff, their editorial staff. We have ours. It's just security and like some professionalism, additional professionalism. We already had professionalism at The Athletic, tons of legitimate, experienced, acclaimed, renowned writers, far exceed me in the teams and the sports that they cover all over the world, in fact. So The Athletic is the best place that I've worked. It's fantastic. The freedom that we have to write the stories and produce the kind of content that we do, whether it's through this kind of medium, like a podcast, short form journalism, long form journalism, game coverage. I've not worked at a place that allows me to be as creative and do the kind of things that I want to do as I have these last 3 years. So that's fantastic. And the big thing is it keeps me here. We're sitting here in Omaha and I've lived in Omaha all my professional career. I grew up in Omaha. I went to school in Lincoln. I didn't want to, after a few years into my career, go out into a professional market, and cover the NFL or Major League Baseball because, family considerations, that's a tough thing to do. Those people, they actually do work hard 52 weeks out of the year, some of them. If you cover a Major League Baseball team, which that's my sport. Baseball is my passion. Like if there was one thing I could do every day, it would probably be just watch baseball. But like if you cover 160 baseball games plus spring training and maybe the postseason, like you may not be able to have a life outside of that. College football, you can, despite what some in my industry might want you to believe. So yeah, going from the World Herald where I covered all Nebraska sports, primarily football, of course, it drives the bus for 13 years to ESPN in 2011. I spent 8 years there. It was great. It exposed me to like everything on a national level, huge company, the worldwide leader, the biggest sports media company in the world. I got to go to Bristol a few times a year in Connecticut and like see how the sausage is made, and I mean, yeah, it's great. But at the end of those 8 years, it was kind of like, all right, well, do I want to keep doing this semi-national stuff and like babysitting these potential playoff teams, or do I want to be around the program that matters to the people who live around me?
Exactly.
And that's what I obviously did at the World Herald, and there were some opportunities to do that at ESPN, but for the most part in those 8 years, I was I was in Florida or Texas or Louisiana or California. Great, love doing that kind of stuff, but ultimately I wanted to get back to doing what was important to me, and that was writing stories that mattered to people who I lived around.
Yeah, well, and you're talking about pivoting essentially and doing what you like, and it seems like a lot of the people in the local media, there's just there's been a lot of changes recently, just people going to different places, and it sounds like people are taking the Mitch Sherman approach and going and seeing other places that aren't Nebraska, and then you see some that are staying put, and so it's kind of cool that you have that freedom to pivot and to be able to cover things that you're passionate about.
Well, I've got to say, I mean, I've been lucky for like a quarter century to be able to do this, and like having never been fired or laid off. I mean, there are great people around me who have had all of those kind of fates, and it's some of it's luck, some of it's just being in the right place at the right time, which I guess is another way to say luck. And then trying to do a good job and trying to be accountable to the people that I work for and my readers, most important, to be valued. So, it can be a really difficult industry, and I mean, you don't usually have the option to say like, okay, do I want to work at ESPN or do I want to work at The Athletic? And that's what I was posed with in 2019, like in the winter of 2019, when I made this decision to do this job. And that's few and far between, so that people get that kind of opportunity. But to your point, the media industry, the sports media industry, covering college sports right now in particular, it's super tumultuous. I mean, it's like it's all over the map. There's people that changing jobs, not just in this Nebraska market, but it's a you go to any major university and you find the people who cover the programs there, and it's the same kind of deal. So again, I'm fortunate to have the stability that I do have. The Athletic, we're all in on covering Nebraska. We're all in obviously on covering college football. There's a passionate fan base here that fortunately wants to read about this team and hear about this team, even when they suck.
Exactly.
Even when they suck.
Right.
Preach.
Yeah, which obviously there have been some instances of that in recent years.
Yeah,
so
some.
I'm being kind here. I'm trying to be diplomatic.
You don't have to be.
But I have it. Give me another beer. Yeah, they were really shitty last year.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's kind of like our thing on this podcast is, you have the people who give the fans the sugar-coated bullshit. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have a platform just to say, like, no, we suck. And it's not okay. It's not acceptable.
And, I feel like you said, passionate fan base, rabid, if you will. Nebraska owes its fans to do the best that they can in their flagship sport, considering how supportive we are. Yeah, you could say there's nothing else here, but we dedicate money, time. We go to the games, tailgate. This guy he's a freaking fiend. It's like, they should be able to do everything that they can and be good at least.
There's a limit to everyone's patience. There's a line that Nebraska doesn't want to find where its fans lose interest. Yeah. And I would hate to see it, because my own livelihood is dependent on Nebraska fans staying engaged.
Yeah.
Staying rabid, staying interested. And they're not, I wouldn't say, all that far off from some apathy setting in. In fact, some apathy has set in. Look at the stadium on a regular Saturday in the fall. Look at it last year. There's not 90,000 people there, and I get the fact that there weren't 90,000 people or 80, whatever the capacity was in the 90s. There weren't necessarily 76,000 at every game. If they're playing Kansas and they're a 28 point favorite, mm-hmm. Some people don't use their tickets, but that this is becoming more of an issue now. Yes, they sell all the seats, or they give away all the seats that they don't sell. It's it's a sellout. The tickets, you can't walk to the box office at kickoff and purchase a ticket. So whatever. you're splitting hairs. You want to call it a sellout? Fine. That's keep your sellout streak alive. That's great. Good.
Yeah.
But the reality is there is some waning interest. It's much easier to get tickets today than it was when I grew up here, when I went to college in Lincoln and they won national championships. And even in the years after that, when the team was relevant on a Big 12 level, even early in the years in the Big 10 when Nebraska played in a conference championship game.
Yeah.
It's different than that right now. And there are options and opportunities for fans to do different things on fall Saturdays. You can watch the game at home on your big screen TV. It's just, I think Trev Alberts is doing what he needs to do to try to look at that, but he can't win games for the team.
No.
Right.
He can decide who the coach is, which is a question that he is being posed with right now here in 2022. He's got a big decision ahead of him if things don't go resoundingly well in the fall that's ahead. That's one thing he can control, but he can't control so many other variables out there that are essential to the success of this team, to the viability of Nebraska football, that matter to Nebraska football fans and the people like me who live it and breathe it for my job on a 52-week out of the year basis.
Now, you bring up the point about Trev Alberts having a rather difficult decision ahead. Unless of course Frost goes out and wins 10 games, and it's pretty apparent. But
yeah, then it wouldn't be difficult.
Yeah,
no, not at all.
Or if he wins 2, then it shouldn't be difficult, right? But there is a middle ground there. And this is what I want to ask you. And this is just me talking. This isn't these guys. But am I crazy in thinking that 5-7 is going to be sufficient enough to keep Frost? And let me back this up a little bit. It'll be 2 more wins that they had last year. So that's a plus. He hired all these new assistants. So they didn't have time to gel, right, to have a successful season. And I feel like Nebraska wants to avoid, they have the Frank Solich hangover, right? They don't want to be accused anymore of, we let our coaches go too early, just like we did with Frank Solich, some would argue. So I think with those reasons, 5-7 doesn't seem all that outlandish to keep Frost. That's just me.
So I think the last piece of criteria that you mentioned there, that they've shown their patience. Nebraska's had 5 consecutive losing seasons.
Yep.
If you get to a 6th, no one's going to accuse you of being impatient after making a change.
You wouldn't think, but there's going to be that portion of the fan base out there.
There certainly is.
Frost
could go 0-12, and there's a portion of the fan base that are going to want to keep it. And he could do it again in 2023, and some people would make excuses for him and say, well, it's this, it's NIL, it's the transfer portal, it's the change in the system, it's Lincoln, it's the expanding Big 10, it's whatever you might come up with. Trev Alberts is not going to be sitting there, resting on that.
Mm-hmm.
Could they go 5-7 and keep him? Yeah. It depends what it looks like.
Right.
There's a lot of talk about the metrics, and there are specific metrics that are being withheld from the public. Fine.
Yeah.
The metrics are not what determines whether Scott Frost comes back in 2023. The metrics are put in place, and you can read it right in the contract, to determine if he gets a bump in salary that's being taken away from him on October 1st, and that determines if he gets his contract extended beyond where it is right now. I think it's 2027 or 8, and it would go another year. Whatever. He would get one more year, a rollover, if he meets those metrics. There's nothing that says that he keeps his job or doesn't keep his job if he meets the metrics. So, in theory, he could fail to meet them and still come back for another season.
Yeah.
On a lesser contract, essentially.
He'd be making less money, and he wouldn't get rolled over. He would be compromised.
Yes.
It would be used against him in recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
It would be even more negativity in the offseason a year from now. So that's not a situation that Nebraska wants to find himself in, is that gray area. But it does exist, and I'm not sure that everybody understands that does exist. I think people feel like, hey, the reason Nebraska's keeping these metrics a secret is because you can't just have a number out there and say, well, if Scott Frost meets this, he keeps his job. If he doesn't meet it, he gets fired. That's not really the way that it's phrased. Although, it may or may not play out exactly like that. I think what matters the most is how the team looks, and close is not good enough.
Yes.
You go 0-9 in one-score games. You go 0-8 in one-score games, 0-9 in single-digit games.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't look good.
No.
There's a narrative that was spun throughout last season and in this offseason that looked good. That was close. It doesn't look good to lose every close game you're in. When your only 3 wins were by 3 or 4 touchdowns or more, or 7 touchdowns in the case of Northwestern. That doesn't look good if you lose every close game. I can't say that and stress that enough.
Yeah.
That's when the coaches make their money. That's when coaching matters.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
when strategy and recruiting and talent development matters, is in the games that are decided by 8 points or fewer, or 10 points or fewer, whatever metric you want to use. But so how do they look in those games? How do they look in do they beat a team that they're not supposed to beat? Do they upset Oklahoma? Can they play close with Michigan, the college football playoff team from last year, on the road? Do they win in November, or is it just all stacked up early in the season?
Right.
What is the offense showing the leadership at Nebraska? Do you see it coming in this first year? Because it's not really fair to just give these offensive coaches 1 year and say, okay, you didn't do enough, goodbye. Right. And that is what happened to Solich. But that was also 18 years ago. So it's not a factor in this situation. Trev Alberts has shown that he's not Steve Peterson, and I don't think that that they should be hamstrung by their bad decisions that exist way back in their history.
So we got into a heated debate a couple weeks ago talking about whether or not we have all these close losses and everything that everything that went on in 2021. And the biggest question that we kind of debated about was like, are we seeing progress from the time that Frost walked in the door to where we are right now?
Yeah, in some ways, in a lot of ways. All right. When he walked in the door, things were in difficult shape, as he and others have reminded us many times. And it probably shouldn't have been brought up after the first year. First year, you want to say, hey, this was a tough job to walk into. Fine. Year 2, no, it's no longer a talking point. Mm-hmm. But it has remained a talking point for some still today. Hey, it was a mess. It was a mess. Mike Riley left it a mess. I will say, Mike Riley was a dead man walking from the day that Sean Eichhorst was let go in the middle of that, early in that 2017 season.
Yeah, Northern Illinois.
He didn't have a chance after that game. That was in part his own doing. He didn't have that team ready in 2017, early in the season. They came out slow. They lost to Northern Illinois. His 80 got canned. He was dead. The whole staff knew it. The players knew it. So 2 months later, when they fired him, it was a mess. I wonder why. It's in large part, his fault. But, let's not go and use that as an excuse for everything that's happened from December of 2017 until July of 2022. After the first 12 months, it's on this staff. Mm-hmm. And, I think in an honest moment, they will tell you that. But we do continue to hear some of that. So what was the question again?
So just
is it better? Is it better now?
Have we seen progress?
Yeah,
I think what we kind of decided was like there is progression in a lot of areas and then regression in some areas.
At that moment in time when the coaching change was made after Thanksgiving in 2017, things are much better in the program right now, but there's still a lot of dysfunction. And there have been things that have happened on Frost's watch that you never would have imagined could have come up. The Oklahoma debacle last spring. The way that Nebraska lost some of the games that they've lost in the last 4 years, rivals the worst moments that Mike Riley had in 2015 through 2017. You remember the Illinois game that Riley coached in his first year where they botched the clock at the end of the game, and you thought, I could never imagine something worse happening.
Just wait.
It has.
Yes.
Arguably worse on Frost's watch multiple times.
Yes.
So they have made progress in a lot of areas. I think they are a more stable program than they were at the end of 2017. But that 2017 team was 12 months removed from winning 9 games in 2016. Season didn't end the way that people wanted it to in 2016, but there's a lot of people now who I think would take a 9-win season that didn't end the way you wanted it to. So it's a complicated answer. Yeah, I think for the most part, the program's in a better place, in part because they've had more resources to put it in a better place, and because of some of the work that Frost and his coaches and the players have done.
This takes me to a mailbag question that you received, and I apologize to that guy for not getting his name, but he asked you, do you think Nebraska came as close to 7, 8, 9 wins as the narrative of some would suggest? And you said, mathematically, yes. Realistically, no. Psychologically, hell no.
Yeah, my editor loved that line.
Yeah.
And I did too. If you could just expand on that a little bit more, the psychological aspect that you feel that this team, that burden that they just cannot clear.
Yeah, I think those words kind of say it all. I can expand on it. There's a mental hurdle, and they admit it. Frost has mentioned on several occasions over the last 3 years that this team just needs something good to happen.
Right.
That they have to have, we got to get a break.
Yeah.
We're not getting a break. Well, sometimes you create your own luck, but often you create your own luck. I would say they have at times been unlucky, but more often they've created their own bad luck by the lack of attention to special teams or the problems with detail on the offensive side, the inconsistency at the receiver position, the
behavior off the field.
I mean, you could say that with like the Maurice Washington situation. And the way that was handled. I think there was a double standard in the program on certain things. The pandemic and the fallout of the 2020 class with the number of players leaving certainly didn't help. And I think that bled over into recruiting the past couple of years. It's made things difficult. They've had to make decisions when they weren't fully informed. They've had to take players who didn't get chances to come on visits like they would have. They've lost out on local recruits because they weren't able to invest in them the way that they might otherwise have if they could have gone and visited their schools. But these are all things that programs around the country deal with. And I'm sitting here making excuses when that's not what my intention is. I don't think that excuses should be made at this point in the Frost regime. Psychologically, they are fragile, and they've been fragile for the entirety of the time that he's been here. And it goes back even to, I would say, the middle part of that 2016 season when they were 7-0 and started losing. And there was that mentality cropped up. It stayed in 2017, and then it stayed the entire time through these last 4 seasons. So they weren't close to winning those one-score games last year. There was a sense of dread. You all saw it against Iowa.
Oh,
yes.
God. I was
We
just
still
going to
had
bring
the
it up.
lead.
Saw it, felt it in my bones.
You all saw it against Michigan State when the punt return went wrong. It's like, how could that happen? And the game wasn't.
There's no one there.
The game wasn't technically lost. It's going to overtime. Who's played better the whole second half? Who's played better almost the whole game? But that was a game where you just knew when it went to overtime, it wasn't going to go Nebraska's way. You certainly had that feeling, and it's been that way in overtime just about every time they've played overtime. The last decade, or close to the last decade. I think the last overtime game they won was the Iowa game in 14. Pelini's at the end of Pelini.
The Kenny Bell pylon catch.
Yep. Right. So those are the psychological things that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I just want to put an exclamation point on that point. Like, I just, in all the years watching Nebraska football, you know how many times I've gone, oh, that's the game. Oh, that's the game. Oh, it's over.
There it is.
And it's not really over. You know what I mean? Like, it's just me being a bitchy fan when something goes wrong.
They were still up.
But Michigan State and Iowa last year,
oh my God,
that was the most confident I had felt that, yep, it's over.
Well, I mean, you're forgetting another one, Michigan. I mean, all we had to do, we had the ball, literally go seal the game, go win it. And then you have a quarterback who's a 4th-year starter fumble the ball. I mean, it's just things like that. They're cursed, aren't they?
That situation, and I'm probably more of an Adrian defender than most, partly because I like him. I like the attitude that he brings. I
Yeah.
get that he did not perform in the clutch in his time at Nebraska.
Right.
I mean, go back to like the Ohio State and Iowa games his freshman year and say, okay, he did then didn't get victories, but he did put the team on his back and keep them in the games. But really after that, when the clutch moments came up, I think it was a psychological hurdle with him too.
Yeah.
And the Michigan situation was, I don't know. I mean, I think it was a questionable late whistle, but hold on to the ball.
Yeah.
Just hold on to the ball.
I think everybody looks at that and says, you just got to hold on to the ball. And I've heard Adrian talk about it too, and he says, I blew it. I didn't hold on to the ball. So
Yeah.
I don't like to put it all on him, but he definitely deserves to get some of the the negative feedback just because he was in the most prominent position on the team for 4 years when they went 15-29.
Yep.
I didn't start every one of just about every one of those
Yeah.
games. That was one that it seemed like it was there for Nebraska again because of the way they dominated in the second half, much late in the third quarter and through the fourth quarter, much like the Michigan State game, the Oklahoma game, and the way that Nebraska came back in that game last year. I didn't have in any way, shape, or form a good feeling when Nebraska got the ball at the end with an opportunity to drive down the field and at least tie it.
Yeah.
I just had been there and seen that before. There's teams and there's players that you watch in football at every level, high school, college, and pro, where you would say, put me in that situation with a minute left or a minute and a half left, give that guy the ball. I feel good about what he's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've not felt that about Nebraska football in a long time.
Okay, we are back on No Block, No Rock. Now, we already talked about what we were drinking. Mitch, what are you drinking over there?
I'm drinking this No Bach. Got a little caramel undertone to it.
Yeah.
It's good. Goes well with pizza. Enjoying it.
Yeah.
Goes well
Absolutely.
with pizza and podcasting,
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mitch Sherman is drinking the No Bach, No Rock. So if you come in here in the tap room, it's on tap. So
For
come
now.
get it.
Big old microphone. You can't miss it.
Yeah, seriously. It's just hanging there. Pull it down. Get some. It tastes good. Okay, now before we went to break, you were talking about how you watch this team and you don't sense any confidence in them in like clutch situations. One of the guys that they brought in was Bill Bush, a guy that has been a subject of many conversations, and you yourself, you wrote a great piece in The Athletic about Bill Bush's pursuit of like Javario Burks, Prince Amukamara, Eric Haig, Marcel Jones, him going into Arizona and getting those guys. And the thing I want to ask you about Bill Bush is, how much pressure is this guy under? Because we look at him as the savior of special teams. He's a special teams savior, right? He's going to make us be number one in all the special teams metrics. Like, is there like too much pressure on the guy right now that we expect so much in so little time?
I think Bill Bush likes the pressure. I think that Mickey Joseph is another guy who is under a lot of pressure, and that's when he operates best. It's probably not a coincidence that both of those guys came to Nebraska from LSU, Bush 2 years ago and Joseph this offseason. SEC is a different kind of pressure. It just is. I mean, if you're at Ohio State or Michigan, fine. Nebraska isn't too far behind that, but there isn't the same kind of pressure at Nebraska right now that there is at those programs. If you win 10 games at Nebraska right now, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
If you win 10 games at Ohio State or LSU right now, you might get fired.
Yeah.
So
Crazy. Yeah.
So I think he enjoys that. I think he thrives in that. I think it drives him. I don't think that he needs the pressure to work hard, but it comes together for him in a good way. Some coaches might respond well to that. Others might not. I think Bill Bush is in the category that does, and that's the kind of guy that you want. To give you a little background on the piece that you mentioned, so that this was a project that I've wanted to do really for a lot of years. And when I came to The Athletic, I pitched this story. This was back in 2019 as something that I'd like to do that's different and outside of the normal coverage that you see about these 5 players who Bill Bush recruited to Nebraska from the Phoenix area into the 2007 class.
Mhm.
And we got through the first year of covering the team, and there were a lot of things that were hitting well, and I didn't necessarily need to write that story. And I looked down the road, maybe we'll do it in 2020. Well, then 2020 was just a screwed up year, and then Javario passed away early in the pandemic. And Javario Burks was the centerpiece of those 5 players. He was the headliner as a recruit. He was a top 100 player. He was coveted by USC and Florida State. In today's age, I think with more exposure on all that those guys do as recruits and some of the camps that you have an opportunity to go to, I think Javario Burks would have been a 5-star player. Of course, being in Phoenix, there was plenty of exposure for him. He could have still been a 5-star player. And he wasn't far from it. Bottom line is the Nebraska coaches felt that he was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, not top 5 rounds, like top 5 in the first round when he started as a true freshman on the offensive line in 2007. So
Wow.
he passed away in 2020 from a brain aneurysm after having, you say, oh, he was a top 5 pick. Why didn't he play in the NFL? Well, he had major health issues that predated his time at Nebraska and didn't get managed properly after the coaching change at the end of the 07 season. And Bill Busch was, of course, part of that staff. Bill Busch recruited those guys for Bill Callahan to Nebraska. And there's always fallout from these coaching changes. We talk about Scott Frost and we talk about Mike Riley, like these things are just, cut and dry. They affect a lot of people when there are coaching changes. And Nebraska made the right move in 2007 to get rid of Bill Callahan and to bring in Bo Pelini. Well, a player like Javario Burks, he fell through the cracks. He didn't have the same kind of support on Pelini's staff that he did on Bill Callahan's staff, where he knew Bill Busch from recruiting, where he knew Denny Wagner, the offensive line coach, and had a great relationship with him, where he had a good relationship with the head coach, who was, if nothing else, a guru when it comes to the offensive line. And it's why Bill Callahan continues to coach offensive linemen in the NFL today, 15 years after he was fired at Nebraska. So Burks was a victim of that coaching change, and it affected him in a negative way. And in one of those ways, they lost track of his medical situation, and it cost him his football career. His kidneys, he had issues that, again, went back to his childhood, and they didn't get managed right at Nebraska in his second season. So likely they were related to his failing health in 2020, when there were all kinds of issues that were outside of COVID. If you had some other kind of medical condition, it often went unchecked and unnoticed. And that's what happened presumably with Javario Burks, and he died 2 years ago this May. So I'm getting way off track here on your question, but I did want to talk about the story since you brought it up.
Yeah.
We're 15 years removed from these 5 guys being recruited by Bill Busch to come to Nebraska, and lo and behold, Busch is back on staff. So I thought this would be a great time to sit down with him. I actually went to Javario's high school in Glendale and saw some people there who remembered him, and ended up getting a hold of his high school coach who no longer works at the school. And I focused the story on Javario, but of course talked to Prince Mukamara, who was Javario's roommate for a period of time. Marcel Jones, who was an offensive lineman in that class with Javario, and was also one of the Phoenix kids. Eric Haig, who was a memorable defender on Nebraska teams in 2009, 10, 11. He had an interesting story to tell in his own right. Will Yancey was a guy who went to high school with Eric and signed with Nebraska in that class, and had a shoulder injury early in his career that was a more normal kind of medical situation that ended his football career, unlike Javario, who it was unusual. So I put that story together. It ran a few weeks ago, and like I said, it focused on Javario, and it focused on Bill Busch and just the job that he did in finding those guys. And he was relentless as a recruiter, and I think that's something he can bring back to Nebraska, not just as a recruiter, but as a special teams coordinator. His attention to detail is relentless. Do I think that Nebraska is going to have the best special teams units in the Big Ten this year? Probably not. But are they going to be the worst? I don't think so. I really don't. I think,
we can only hope.
Mitch Sherman is on record.
Right. They won't be worst. I think they'll be good. I think that it's finally an area of the team that they are devoting attention to in 2022 for the first time in the proper amount of attention. I know that I think fondly of Javon DeWitt, who was the special teams coordinator and outside linebackers coach, and coached through a season when he was going through cancer treatment at Nebraska. Right. 2 seasons where he was impacted by his own medical situation, which was life-threatening. And he ended up at North Carolina. I think he's since moved on from there, but good guy. He had too much on his plate, trying to coach outside linebackers and do special teams and deal with his own life outside of football that was presenting some challenges. And I think Mike Dawson had too much on his plate last year as the outside linebackers coach and special teams coordinator. You need somebody in this conference where the margin for error is so thin, especially in the Big Ten West. We talked about all the one-score games and the single-digit losses. Well, that says the margin for error is really thin. And often in those situations, special teams are what produce victories. And look around. Many of the teams in the Big Ten West have special teams coordinators. And if they don't, they probably have a proven system that is entrenched and a culture where special teams is clearly emphasized. And they don't have a giant glaring problem with special teams like Nebraska has had for several seasons now. So I think they've finally turned the switch on that and have made this change. It's probably not going to get fixed overnight, but they've done the job as best they can to make it happen this year by bringing in a scholarship punter, by bringing in a scholarship kicker, both as transfers from the FCS level, by recruiting some high school players and junior college players whose number one contribution to the team this year might be on kick returns, by stressing to all of the defensive backs and running backs and linebackers and wide receivers how important it is to be on the coverage and return units. So I think that will help. I don't think that you're going to see the same kind of repeated disasters that we've seen on special teams.
Dumbassery.
Yeah. Right. And to your point on the Big Ten West, what are the 3 teams that we consistently lose to? It's Iowa, Wisconsin, and Northwestern. Northwestern is like 50-50. It's always a close game.
Put Minnesota in that category. It's
Minnesota. And those are all teams that just don't screw up. They just wait for you to beat yourself. And so if and from the time that we started in January 2021 to now, that's all we've asked for. Just get somebody, a special teams coordinator. Just get somebody whose only role is to make sure that special teams doesn't go awry.
Yeah, I think right around that time after the 2020 season, I was writing about it. Like, if you do anything else this offseason, hire a special teams coordinator. And that was the year going into 20 actually was the year they went with an analyst, Jonathan Rutledge, in the special teams role.
That was a disaster.
Yeah, and that did not work. I wrote about it after the 2019 season, so early in 2020, calling. And I'm not saying that I don't. Scott Frost knows a lot more football, obviously, than any of us in the media, and he has to run his program the way he wants to run his program. But I do think there's an element of stubbornness there too, and I think
arrogance.
I think that when people had told him or suggested, what through in person or through the media to do this, I think there's a part of him that has wanted to show that he could do it a different way. That's not healthy. You should do things the best way, the way that they work, the way that they make the most sense. I get that he would have to take a coach off the field who coaches a position to coach special teams, but it's 10% of your staff, 10% of your assistant coaches, less than 10% of your staff, much less than 10% of your staff when you talk about all the support roles that you're allowed to have now, and analysts and interns, and they got in trouble for having an analyst do too much. So let's not, maybe back away from that a bit, but. They should have done it earlier. They should have done it 2 years earlier, at a minimum. And I think some of the heartache that we've seen these last couple of years could have been alleviated.
Yeah. Well, and we had even talked about it like on one of our first episodes. We were talking about Beamer Ball. Like,
Beamer.
If you're not going to hire a special teams coordinator, take it upon yourself. Scott Frost has been GA. He's he was at Northern Iowa. I mean,
K-State.
K-State. It's not like he doesn't know how to coach special teams. I understand.
He was a special team standout in the NFL.
Exactly.
Himself.
Yes, exactly. He was under a lot of good tutelage. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you are going to be stubborn or arrogant, in my opinion, not hiring a special teams coordinator, take it on yourself and take pride in that unit. You knew it was a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bill Snyder did that for years, and partly himself, and then as an extension with his son, Sean, to emphasize special teams at Kansas State. And I think it was, at first, the number one driving force that took Kansas State from doormat of the Big 8 to national championship contender in the Big 12 in less than 10 years was that they emphasized special teams. Yeah, they emphasized junior college recruiting, and they kind of owned the Kansas JUCOs and did a really nice job with their system, and they had their own version of the option offense and got some good athletes in there and running backs and defensive backs, and they ball hawked in the secondary. Great. But the first thing that they did was pay attention to special teams and start blocking kicks and start returning punts and kickoffs for touchdowns. And Nebraska got snake bit by it a few times, usually in games that the Huskers managed to win because they were that much better than Kansas State talent-wise. But eventually, Kansas State got them when they did build up that talent. In '98 was the first time, and they had a Heisman Trophy contender, a Heisman Trophy finalist, I believe, in Michael Bishop that year. So, but it started with special teams, and it started with the head coach, knowing that special teams was important and not just stressing it and having a coordinator who he directly oversaw, his son, but also taking it upon himself to coach that part of the team or help coach that part of the team. Frost didn't really have that availability in his daily routine the last 4 years because he was so involved in the offense, because he was calling the plays. He had Matt Lubick to rely on a bit the last couple of years, but Frost was he was the engineer of that offensive system. And I think legitimately he's stepping away. We'll see.
Well, you'd hope so with Whipple.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Hashtag we'll see.
I'll believe it when I see it.
We'll see. I still think that it's a little bit convoluted, and I was scratching my head a few times. Again, they know more football than me, but I scratched my head a few times in the spring when I listened to, and sometimes you have to read between the lines, the stuff that they say at these media sessions, it really can be, that for me, that probably goes, I probably have the benefit of having heard these things for 20 years plus.
Right.
So I know how to filter in a lot of cases. Probably know how to filter better than some of the coaches who are trying to not have it filtered.
There you go.
So I've been doing it longer than some of them. Certainly all of the players. And there was a day when the tables were turned on that, and the players were talking to me when I was young, and stuff was going over my head. Hopefully that doesn't happen as much now. And my read on it in the spring was that, it's Whipple's system, and they're really emphasizing the install of his passing game. And Casey Thompson he has the skill set to be the right guy who can do the kind of thing that Kenny Pickett did last year. But Scott still wants to have a lot to do with the way the offensive line blocks. And he still wants to have a lot to do with the way the run game is schemed. So you get into August and they start making that game plan for Northwestern. I wonder how it comes together. And then on game day, how it comes together. What happens in a game where they're down a touchdown late in the third quarter and the offense hasn't been playing well? Who's calling the plays then? Who's sending, we'll see. It's best for everyone if he can truly step aside, because that's all that's left. You might not have said that a few years ago. You might have said never, ever, ever. Like Tom Osborne. He should never step aside from calling plays. He's a genius. And, Frost, where did he learn?
Right.
He learned from the master at that. So why would he ever want to step aside? Well, you've tried for 4 years. And
you're 15 and 29. That's why.
It hasn't worked. So you got to try something different. And I don't think you can go back on that. I don't think you can change midstream if you start to face some adversity, if you start to have whatever kind of drama or dysfunction that could prop up. Something's going to happen in August. Somebody's going to get hurt. There's going to be a disagreement. Something's going to happen. And in that moment, how is he going to react? Who's going to take control of the offense? I would say that if I had a vested interest in this, I would be concerned that Scott is going to want to step back over that line, and you're going to have two cooks in the kitchen, and it could potentially lead to a problem.
Ever since Mark Whipple got hired, we've talked about, how he's the wily vet. He's the guy that's going to call out the bullshit. He's going to be the guy that if he senses that you're being cute about something, or you're you're drawing up a play that's not necessarily necessary, I guess. You're closer to the program. Is that the kind of impression that you get from Whipple, that he's just the guy that's going to say, Scott, I've been doing this for so many years. Shut up. Let me do it.
I don't think he has any problem expressing his opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think and that's a good, and that's why I think, I think, I can't say that I have been told this firsthand, but my read on the situation is that Trev Alberts wanted and encouraged Scott Frost to hire somebody who had a strong will and was not going to be afraid to go to battle if he needed to implement his offense. I don't think he wanted a young guy in there as the OC. I think he wanted somebody with experience who, frankly, doesn't really have much to lose. If Mark Whipple coaches here 1 year and gets his $2 million, he's going to go back to Scottsdale, and it's not going to impact him one bit other than having some bruised pride. And I think he'll get over that in about 12 hours.
Yeah.
So, right. His career is set.
Yeah.
What he's done, his legacy, his the money that he's earned, everything. It's fine. This is the final opportunity for him to do one more thing, to make one more stop, to help turn around one more program. Maybe it could be his greatest accomplishment, or maybe it could just be something that gave him some money for retirement.
Payday.
And, it's just kind of all forgotten. Well, that didn't work. Dang. Yeah. That's too bad. Unfortunately, people in Nebraska have a lot more invested than that.
Yes.
But the good part about that is he's not going to be afraid to go down swinging. So I do think that is potentially a good thing, that he's going to stick up for himself, that he's going to do what is needed to get his system there. And if that means telling Frost to move out of the way and let him do his job, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how that's met, what the reaction is in there within the coaching offices, if they ever have to have that discussion, or if they've had it already. I don't know.
Yeah, and so you're talking about Whipple, how his legacy is already kind of cemented, and he doesn't really necessarily need to do that much anymore. That's kind of where I'm a little worried, is if Scott tries to dip his hands in that pot, Whipple's going to be like, okay, you brought me here. You're gonna fuck this up. I'm gonna get fired. I'm gonna get paid anyway. So you know what? If you want to try to get your grubby little hands in this pot again, have at it, because I'll just get fired, and so what?
It can go either way.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It just kind of depends on, with Whipple, what's inside his head in that moment. Does he dig his heels in and say, no, we're going to do this my way, and if we both go down, so be it? Or will he throw up his hands and say, hey, it's your program, man. You
can go down with the ship. This is your name on it. So
it's impossible to know.
Yeah.
You would think, with a guy who's been through as much as he has and has had the experiences, not all good, but has had the experiences that he's had in coaching, just the number of stops that he's had, that I think we all can assume this is his last coaching job, that he's going to give a shit, that he's going to to want to do it right. And if that means ruffling some feathers, okay, he'd rather do it that way than just throw up his hands and say, yeah, you made your bed. I don't think that's going to be his mentality. And part of that is from the few conversations that I've been able to have, in a group with Whipple. I think he's got a strong personality. I don't think his personality is such that he's going to give up easily.
Yeah.
Mark, take charge.
Mike, you're our only hope.
Okay, so it's July 5th, right? 2 new commitments have come through. Today.
One, I think,
a couple hours ago,
right before we went on taping here.
Yeah, Dylan Rogers.
There you go. And Omarion Miller, right?
Yes, Omarion Miller, wide receiver from Louisiana. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mickey Joseph putting in work. I don't think we had any doubts about that he would recruit like a madman. What's your first impression? A couple hours in, what have you digested about these guys that should give us Husker fans hope? Hopefully.
Well, I don't know anything about Dylan Rogers other than what I read before his commitment. I think I learned of that. I saw his tweet while we were getting ready to start taping here. Miller, yeah, I was out and about this afternoon and wrote up a story on him on my phone. Maybe the reason that I don't feel as much stress sometimes from this job is because, I didn't run home and, spend 2 hours. So let's get the news. Let's get the news on the site. The Athletic, I will say this in all seriousness, I said we get freedom at the Athletic to write stories the way we want to write them. Like, I'm going to write something big about O'Marion Miller at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not necessarily needing to run and do that today. Like, Nebraska fans are going to want to read about him in August or September, or later this month. Let's see where this recruiting class goes. Let's see how the season starts. Let's see if he stays committed. If Nebraska loses a game in September, and he might be the headliner of this entire class. He's a top 100 player. He's a 4-star. Looks good on paper. I mean, if you can get a kid that LSU wants, I reached out to our LSU writer as soon as the news came on Miller this afternoon, Brody Miller, who is great and has been a great resource for me. I hope I've been a good resource for him, as Nebraska and LSU have had this incestuous relationship in recent months in trading coaches. And, there's just all kinds of stuff that's gone on between these two programs. Brody's great. And I said, hey, did O'Marion Miller have a legit offer from LSU? Because you wonder that when there's a Louisiana guy who commits to Nebraska. And he said, yeah, they brought him in on a camp visit recently and they liked him. So Mickey just went out and beat LSU for a Louisiana guy, which is crazy to think. I mean, like, you can look at that in Nebraska and say, like, okay, Oklahoma came into Nebraska and beat the Huskers for a player last year in Caden Helms and a player this year in Cade McIntyre from Fremont. Well, Oklahoma is a perennial Big 12 champ, and future SEC program. They are a college football playoff regular. So yeah. Okay, I could see maybe how a kid from Nebraska might be interested in going to OU.
Right.
But this is arguably more impressive, or maybe inarguably more impressive, for Nebraska to go to Louisiana and find not just one, but Mickey has gotten numerous players out of Louisiana now. Pulling a guy like Trey Palmer off the roster. And I get it. There were issues with Trey Palmer and Brian Kelly, the new coach at LSU. Maybe he didn't have a full invite, or he would have had to do some things to get back on.
No 360 camera, right?
But he's a good player, right? Like the recruits, he's not part of his family.
Family.
But my son can do that better than anybody. He's 11, so we have a good time. But he got DeColdis Crawford out of Louisiana. So no doubt, Mickey Joseph is doing a good job in recruiting, and that's probably the main takeaway I have from the news of today, July 5th, on what Nebraska's doing in picking up these commitments. They're at 13 now on this class, so it's taking shape, and it's taking shape in a different way than what happened in that 2022 class, which all came together late and then needed a boatload of transfers to rank in the respectable regions of the Big Ten.
How I would love to be a fly on the wall whenever there's a visit that comes through and Mickey Joseph is the main player. I need to see it, because like you said, Nebraska has not been good. And so if they can poach a Louisiana bred wide receiver from LSU, it's like, is he selling snake oil? Like, what is this dude? Is he putting something in their drink to make them like, woo? I don't know. Like, what is he doing, man?
I honestly think Mickey is just Mickey, and you don't need to be a fly on the wall in an official visit to get a sense of why he's appealing to recruits and their parents. If you listen to him in an interview, I think you kind of get it. There's some guys who are real in their interviews. There's some, I'll say the opposite first. There's some coaches who aren't real in their interviews, and you get very little sense of their personality, who they are, how they might come across to recruits, why they appeal to players, whatever it might be, when they're in front of the cameras and talking to people like me. And then there's Mickey Joseph, who I think you see exactly who he is when he's out there talking. And that's just the way that he chooses to do it. I'm not saying that the guys who hide their personalities from the media are any worse for it. All the NFL coaches do it. I mean, it's like the Bill Belichick model. You have no idea who that guy's a robot, and there's all kinds of NFL coaches, and it seeps down to college. He's a robot in front of the media, not in his real life.
Right.
And it seeps down to colleges. There's plenty of, there's coaches who just say that there's no benefit for me to go out there and talk to these guys like I really am, because they're just going to twist my words. And these guys and women in the media, they're just going to twist my words. And I don't see any payback any payoff in that, in operating like that. So I'm just going to I'm going to take the Belichick model. Mickey Joseph does not do that. Mickey Joseph is very real. So I think that appeals, and that works for him, and that appeals to people. And he's just he tells it like it is. He's probably not everybody is going to like his style. We saw a prominent player in Xavier Betts leave the team over spring break this year, and I don't think that it was because he didn't jive with Mickey Joseph. I think Mickey and Xavier were okay. I think it had more to do with Xavier's lack of love for the game of football.
Yes.
But I also think that Mickey wasn't going to sugarcoat it for him. He was going to be real. And that didn't work in that moment for Xavier Betts. So it works for a lot of kids. Clearly, he's had a ton of success appealing to these players and their families from Louisiana. That's where he's from. He knows the culture. He understands what they want to hear. And I think he genuinely believes what he tells them, and people can see that when they're talking to him and being recruited by him.
Head coaching material?
Well, I mean, he has the intangibles. I think he's going to be on the Nebraska staff for as long as he wants to be on the Nebraska staff. I mean, I can answer the question the way that you want me to answer it.
Or I don't want you to. I
can just dance around it. I don't think that he's going to be Scott Frost's successor, because I think Trev Alberts, if he's put in that position to have to find a new head coach this year or next year, that he's going to value head coaching experience a lot. Especially in this era where head coaches deal with more than they've ever had to. The NIL piece is immense in what an athletic director needs to consider as he or she brings in a head coach. So Mickey has a job on every Nebraska staff for as long as he wants to. He's 54. So, he wants to work at Nebraska till he's 65. Great.
Please.
He can do it. Yeah.
Second coming of Ron Brown, right?
Hold on. It's July, so they haven't played any games with him as a coach yet. But from all intents and purposes, what we can see from afar, damn good not head coach. That was a Freudian slip there.
He's an associate head coach.
Yeah, damn good associate head coach.
What does that mean exactly? What's an associate head coach? What is that?
Well, it's a title to get him the authority to get Trev Alberts and Scott Frost the authority to pay him more money.
Yep.
So.
Okay. That's what we assumed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's touch on the last topic. It'll be a fun topic. USC, UCLA are slated to join the Big Ten in 2024.
Shit, I hadn't heard that.
You hadn't heard that, right? What? Do you think there are more to come? Do you think they're essentially going to take the NFL model of 2 super conferences? What do you think is going to be in the future of college football?
The NFL model of Fox versus ESPN.
Yeah.
People keep saying Big Ten and SEC. I'm like, no.
No, it's network versus network.
Exactly.
Well, that has a lot to do with it. And, I kind of joke, but Fox and its ownership of the Big Ten network and its agreement that is coming with the Big Ten in the media rights package that is likely going to be announced, I don't know, maybe before this podcast is posted.
Yeah.
This month, in the month of July. I mean, I'd be shocked if you don't get an announcement from the Big Ten on its media rights deal that goes into effect a year from now. The current deal expires in the summer of 2023. So they get a new one next year, upwards of $1 billion, which if you divide it by 16, you're talking about 65 million, could be more. If it's more than $1 billion, hey, what's 1.1 billion when you're talking $1 billion?
You're right.
So, just give every team another 10 million or so. 16 teams, of course, you have to, the pie is split more widely. But the first year it's just 14 teams. It may be a situation where the money is bigger in year 2 when USC and UCLA are in there.
Yep.
It was important for the Big Ten to announce this round of expansion before it got all the way to the finish line on the media rights deal, because obviously having USC and UCLA makes the Big Ten more valuable to Fox and to whether it's ESPN, ABC, CBS, NBC, Amazon, whoever is doing Big Ten games, streaming and broadcasting Big Ten games. And I'd expect it's going to be like a more multifaceted approach than what the Big Ten enjoys right now, when the pot is like $780 million. I mean, it's still $55 million a school.
Yeah.
Right.
So I take some issue with the narrative. We'll go back to narratives, with the narrative that these schools can't afford NIL, that all of the donor money is going to be going to the collectives, and there's going to be nothing left for these schools, and they're all going to start to go bankrupt, and nobody's going to be able to build facilities. Nebraska's opening a $165 million facility next year, a year from now, in July of 23, for football and for its whole athletic department to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the tip of the iceberg on what they're going to do with Memorial Stadium. I think that project at Memorial Stadium, and Trev Alberts has been out surveying fans for the last however many months, for the portion of this year. I'm sure you guys saw the survey.
Got the survey.
Everybody,
Oh yeah.
everybody
took
got
it.
the survey. That project, whatever they decide to do, and it won't be everything that was in there, but whatever they decide to do, it's going to be more than $165 million.
Yeah.
So where's that money going to come from? If donors are giving all their money to collectives, first of all, they're not going to give all their money to collectives. They're going to give some.
Yep.
It's going to come from the TV rights, from the multimedia rights. And the Big Ten is about to hit the jackpot with multimedia rights, in part because it's adding USC and UCLA as two extremely valuable properties. So if you have the opportunity as the Big Ten to go out and get more valuable properties who increase the value of that whole pot, even if you go 17, 18, 19, 20, when you divide it up, if the money that's coming in is more to each school, then it's worthwhile. It's worth doing. Screw tradition, screw the rivalry games, get rid of the trophy games. I mean, This is not me saying this.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the accountants.
This
Yeah.
is the
In-
money
in-
talking. Yeah.
Right.
The accountants.
Yeah. So, I think that a lot of this is going to happen at the expense of some of that tradition, and you're not going to be able to see the Big Ten cling to some of its past in the way that it has. This is no longer the cozy little conference. The last major, I'm sorry, Rutgers and Maryland, but the last seismic move that the Big Ten made was adding Nebraska.
Yep.
11 years ago. 12 years ago it was announced. 11 years ago the Huskers came in. They were the long-awaited partner for Penn State, which joined the league in 1990. That's when the Big Ten went from 10 to 11. And it was 11 until Nebraska came in and made it 12. Look how fast we're moving now.
Yeah.
After they waited 30 years for a Penn State, or 20 years, for a Penn State partner. It's going much faster.
Yeah.
And it's all because of this huge money. So, yeah, the Big Ten would take Notre Dame today. If that works, great. That's priority number one. After that, we'll see. Will they go after Oregon? It looks like that's a possibility. Would they go after a Stanford or a Washington or a TCU? Maybe another school from the Big 12. It depends on what happens with the Big 12. If I was the Big 12 and the Pac-12, I'd quit cannibalizing each other and trying to tear each other apart and say, hey, we have an opportunity maybe to make something if we combine forces. I don't know if they're on that same page. Both of those leagues have new commissioners. The Big 12, a brand new commissioner.
Yep.
The Pac-12, he's been there for a year or less. So can they figure out a way to, and I'm just, talking out loud here. Can they I have no inside information. Haven't even really heard this speculated, but there are enough big players, I think, between what's left of those two leagues to make a legitimate conference. I don't believe that they'll have the savvy to do that. I think the SEC and the Big Ten have taken over and are going to tear those leagues apart because the money that they're going to be able to offer is more than what could be produced if, say, for example, the Big 12 and the Pac-12 tried to combine.
This reminds me, I'm a huge Seinfeld stan. When Kramer and Newman are on the subway and they're playing that game of Risk, and they're going around, and Newman's worried about his Ukrainian troops, and Kramer's like, the Ukraine is weak. They offer nothing. And it's like, we're looking at this map and we're going, this team will produce revenue. This team won't. Out.
Yeah.
And it's like, gosh, me and Mike, one of our best friends, he's a Iowa State football fan. Like this dude, he has it tatted on his arm. Okay. And one of the things I look forward to is watching an Iowa State game with him because he is a freaking.
I don't enjoy it actually.
I'm more amused and entertained than anything.
There you go.
But it's like, it's sad because it's going to take away that what brought us to college football in the first place. You know, the regionality of it, the rivalries. And even though Iowa State and Nebraska aren't in the same conference that have been in a while, it's just like the games that he's going to watch from now on, what are the stakes?
Yeah.
You know?
The sad reality for Iowa State is that in spite of having a great coach, great football coach, and a competent athletic department, and I don't mean that like in comparison to any other athletic department. I just think Iowa State they do a nice job with the resources that they have. The Big 12, by losing Oklahoma and Texas and then adding 4 more teams that they have to split the revenue with, all of those remaining schools, all of the schools that are left behind with OU and Texas's departure are taking a huge hit in the amount of money that they're going to earn. So great. You got Cincinnati and Houston and BYU and UCF, and those make for some probably pretty entertaining football games on a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday night. I'm gonna enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
But the schools are going to suffer at the end of the day because the bottom line is not what it is, not close to what it is with Oklahoma and Texas. So Iowa State, you're left to look for an exit, and I don't necessarily mean the school, but I mean the people who are most desirable within the school, and that really sucks for Cyclone Nation.
Yeah, especially with Matt Campbell. I mean, he's
Jamie Pollard,
a hell of an AD. I mean,
yeah,
Nebraska probably should give him a call. But I mean,
we got Trev.
Trev's fine. He's fine. He's a Nebraska guy. We could go.
Yeah,
we love that. So, no, yeah, I think the whole Iowa State thing's kind of tough because it's like going back to your statement about rivalries don't matter, trophies don't matter. An Iowa State fan would say, oh, well, but we play Iowa. It's a rivalry. Oh, Nebraska, Big 12, Big 8 rivalries, But you don't make a lot of money. The revenue just isn't there,
It's cold and calculated, right? Like you said, the accountants said this, not us, right? The accountants.
I mean, at some point, like if conference rivalry games are going to be a victim of expansion and larger pools of teams within leagues, then the non-conference games don't stand a chance. I mean, your Iowa State rivalry, goodbye. I mean, I hope it stays. I hope they find a way to make it stay. I hope that there's protected opponents inside and outside of conferences. But the most likely scenario is that divisions are gone. Divisions, they're on their last breath. When USC and UCLA come in, forget about it. You're not going to have an 8-team West and an 8-team East. It doesn't make any sense. So you'll have probably 3 protected opponents and then a rotating group of 6 that you play for a 4-year period, and then maybe another 6 for the next 4-year period. And Nebraska fans would say, okay, give us Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin.
No, I thought you meant Ohio State. No, again.
Ohio State. Ohio State is a protected rivalry. But, who are USC and UCLA's protected opponents going to be? One of them is going to have to be Nebraska.
Yep.
Nebraska's the new kid on the block somewhat within the league, doesn't have these trophy games with all these schools, and it's geographically on the right side of the league.
San Diego.
So Nebraska fans are probably going to get a trip to LA every other year, because I would guess that USC or UCLA, probably not both, but one of the two are going to be an every year opponent for Nebraska in football. I'm okay with that. I'll go to LA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
Give me Lincoln Riley every year, right?
Well, I'm
until the games happen.
Yeah. Careful what you wish for.
Well, and you brought up the NFL thing was, AFC, NFC, each of those conferences have the 4 divisions. And I think they're gonna add Oregon and Washington, and that's gonna be that West.
Yeah, now
of those 4, and
then they could be protected with each other.
Yeah, and so that travel is easy because a lot of people make fuss about the travel. Oh, USC has to go to Penn State. Well, maybe once every 10 years I'll have to do that or something. But this brings up something that I have on my mind. There's this, notion that the Big Ten likes to screw Nebraska in terms of scheduling and officiating. Now, what I want to ask you, Mitch, is with the Big Ten, scheduling Ohio State and Nebraska virtually every year, does that just show the confidence that the Big Ten has in Nebraska's brand in knowing that they're going to get those eyeballs? Like, does it just kind of confirm like how they view Nebraska, like a brand? They're going to bring people to the TV sets. Money's going to be spent. Like, why would the Big Ten want Nebraska to be 3-9? Wouldn't they want them to be competing for conference championships? Like, do you kind of get what I'm asking here?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question about officiating and scheduling, I don't think it's anything calculated. I think it's just general incompetence.
Okay, that's fair. I think it's
I
the
will
same
accept
way.
that.
I think
Yeah.
it's the same.
Nobody's out, and the only time I ever like kind of turned my head in a curious way was at the end of the run in the Big 12.
Oh, right.
And the Texas A&M game in 2010, some of the stuff that happened in the 2009 game against Texas at Jerry World.
What happened? No.
And I don't even really mean putting a second back on the clock, but just there's a pass interference call that I'll be doing a podcast with my coworkers Andy Staples and Max Olson in the upcoming hours or days where we've all rewatched that game.
Oh,
the
sweet.
2009
Oh, wow.
Nebraska Texas game. And Andy, who does great. He's great at podcasting and as a writer and covering national college football. He's been doing these rewatch parties. And then he'll have a couple writers on. Like I listened to the one that he just did with Georgia, Alabama from the Tua game, where Tua came off the bench as a freshman and threw the touchdown pass to win the national championship. And Andy had Aaron Suttles, our Alabama writer, and Seth Emerson, our Georgia writer. And it was just fascinating to listen to their stories about that game. I hope that Max and I can bring that same kind of insight and energy and entertainment value to our rewatch party of Texas, Nebraska. But as I rewatched it, I definitely thought like, man, that was questionable.
Suspect.
I don't see that happening in the Big Ten. And I know there's been bad officiating over and over. Sometimes, a couple things. Sometimes as a team, you put yourself in position to have bad calls made against you because there's a reputation or there's just the officials are human. They look for mistake. They look for some teams to make mistakes more regularly than they do other teams. And that's an error in judgment on their part, but it happens and it's part of football. And then the other thing I was going to say is that Alabama or Ohio State, you don't hear them cry too much about the officiating because they're rarely in position for bad calls to cost them games. Mm-hmm. So Nebraska is always in position for bad calls to cost it games. And then every fan base kind of has a complex about officials too, and it's a big one right now at Nebraska just because of the place that the program is in. But yeah, absolutely, the Big Ten is a better place, is a better conference if Nebraska is relevant and winning games and competing for championships. That's why Jim Delaney wanted the Huskers in this league.
Yep. Thank you, Tom Osborne. Who knows? If we're still in the Big 12 and we've been having seasons like we've been having recently, who knows where Nebraska would be? Would they be with the basement K-State, Iowa State? Even Baylor might be left. It's crazy. Who knows?
Yeah.
But looking in hindsight, that move was just grade A, freaking prime rib for greatness,
for stability and finances.
Yeah, absolutely.
For tradition and some people's favorite restaurants, maybe not.
Right. All right. Well, Mitch, just plug. This is the time of the podcast episode where you just plug yourself. Where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Yeah. Well, first, enjoyed being with you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Had a good time. You guys do a good job here. So this is fun. I'd if you're listening, I'd encourage people to keep listening. I'll become a regular listener now. I want to hear what you guys have in store for your listeners down the road. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
You can find me at The Athletic. Go download the app and go to the website and check out all the great stuff we're doing with our business, with our growing business, with our backing and our support from the New York Times. I think it's a super exciting place to work, and the products that we're putting out there with our content are just going to continue to grow exponentially. Get a subscription. You can get it for $1 a month, and most of the time, and then hopefully when you renew, you think it's worth it to pay the $4 or $5 a month or whatever. I think it is.
Like I think it is too.
If you're a sports fan, it's not just Nebraska football. If you're a sports fan, it's a national college football. It's college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a Major League Baseball team? Do you have an NFL team? Do you have an NHL team, an NBA team? Are you a fan of Premier League soccer? Whatever it is, The Athletic is at the top with having you covered across the board. So go to the site, check us out. There's content you can get on there for free to kind of get a taste of us with our breaking news and our short form journalism, and then take the dive into some of the deeper stories like the one I talked about with the 5 kids from Phoenix. That I think is worth the $1 a month right there by itself. And we'll have tons of good stuff coming up this summer. We're still doing our State of the Program series where we take deep dives on every Power 5 and prominent Group of 5 college football team. I've already done Nebraska, and I wrote the Minnesota one that published here in June. So I'd encourage people to go check it out. Follow me on Twitter at Mitch Sherman, and you can hear me on the radio and various podcasts and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys
before we sign off, who is your Major League Baseball team? You said you're a baseball guy.
Oh God.
So it's the only team that I have. Like I don't have an NFL team or anything else, but I'm a lifelong Kansas City Royals fan.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
It's
Good
like-
for you guys.
Yeah, well, we suffer together then, in
It's a
football
li-
and baseball.
Sometimes I say it's a life sentence.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah. 2016 happened and 15. too.
2015.
15.
14 and 15 happened.
Oh no,
but
the 16
15
were the
happened.
Cubs. Oh,
16 was the Cubs.
Yeah, they still live rent free in your head, right?
my bad. Yeah. All right, guys, go do that. Go follow Mitch Sherman. Get a subscription to The Athletic. It is worth it. I have it myself. It is awesome. And all right, we'll sign off, guys. Thanks a lot, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thank you.